Were it not for the bronze oxidation or copper oxidation and a little bit of design, these churches would be almost as plain as most mosques are. One can imagine that once upon a time these colonnades were open. What used to be, I think, a hydroelectric dam, but it's no longer in use. Now it is just a convenient footbridge. I understand the concept of destroying an old dam and freeing the river, but why, when you don't choose to destroy it, do you nevertheless choose to dismantle it? Why not continue to use it for electricity? Alas, it is a footbridge across, but it goes nowhere. This is an interesting system. It looks like you walk down here, you could turn that pulls that chain up, apparently, but not very far. It rotates that wheel, and presumably that wheel climbs up this cog. And that presumably underneath that wheel is a wall for damming the water. If I'm where I think I am, it's right here where this circle is, and this is supposed to be one of the old sections of town. And so we're just going to go explore. I'll walk around these lower reaches and then I'll work up on this upper streets. He says they're interesting. Most of those buildings up there just look old, including the two on the right, although the balconies are the most pleasing element of them. But here is an older building that looks like it may possibly be going to be restored. Well, taking it right down to the frame, that's for sure. Has magnificent views. Still looking for anything that looks unique or interesting, other than what must be magnificent views. Imagine that once upon a time this was a pretty building, but it's just been allowed to deteriorate into nothing. The sad thing is they have deteriorated enough that they're just going to rip them down. A once pretty wooden door defiled by the elements. Pictures are found often as I walk about, and what they are is people who have died. It's a death notice, if you will, akin to our newspaper obituaries, which they also include. And this building may reflect the legal status of old buildings in Bulgaria, at least buildings designated by the government as such, and that is you can do anything you want with the inside, but the facade must stay. One of the problems is the people who have the high ground here on the edge of this have an incentive to improve because they have such phenomenal views, although for whatever the reason some don't. A building obviously has been raised in between these two buildings, and presumably whoever owns their cells, the next person can then build right into that. Going up this stairs here, often as not, these stairs will lead to someone's private residence, and therefore you can go no farther. And properties up here have a great incentive, and that's the view. But what is the story behind a property like this one? And can somebody buy this and build something else high? I think I can go farther, but you can't be sure. It may be that this little pathway, surrounded by a bunch of cats, represents as far as you can go for this cluster of homes here. And this would be a pretty place to live. You have a place to park, apparently. Nobody else can get in, needs to get in. But again, in spite of the laudatory comments of Walter and Ron, I can't see a reason to be here. There's a apparently the house of Stefan Dunyov, 1816-1889. No doubt well restored. And we may not be on a road, but on a path to somebody's back door. Well, not sure yet. Lots of construction up here, or at least some. It appears to be what would have been an old intersection, and maybe a little townlet square, for lack of a better term. An old building here that's certainly interesting. And living in a little place like that, if it were fully restored, made secure with all the amenities. Drive up would be a typical Teton or Grovant Road four-wheel drive experience, although they use regular cars. A pretty little building that probably was expanded into the other to create this nice home with lovely flowers. Here we've arrived at a little square where buildings have probably been either restored or totally rebuilt. And it's somewhat of a tourist area. Looks like an old hotel, or if not a church in the past, I don't know. Only a tourist hangout. Well, at least it's something novel, so we'll walk down through here. There are a number of Americans here shopping, which is perhaps what we unfortunately did best as tourists. All tourists do. I think that they're tour bus tourists. Here we look at the pros rebuilding the road. Over then. Like he embeds those in cement, leaving a fairly deep gap around each rock, perhaps to be filled in just by dirt and so forth. This church property protected by a zillion reproducing cats. You wonder how they eat. Interesting, and speaks of the past. Of course, being a church, it probably has a high probability of a longer life. But these tiers, probably retaining walls, although there's a stairway there going up, and there a whole series of arches under that wall. Again, it may just be for support. They're a mosaic. And up above, here's some of the detail that once existed. Here the tower. Might be quite old. A new rectory perhaps built next door, whatever a rectory is. Interesting how unchurch-like it looks. Here the entrance is interesting, probably very stately and lovely when it was brand new, and the wood was either painted. Looks like there's some blue color up there. And the stonework was all new and fresh. In 1836. A bust of someone. Altar end now, and probably this was richly painted at one time. I'll wander down this tight alley just because it is so. Once upon a time, there were houses on both sides of this alley, and they both stuck out maybe as far as that one does, although the second house is recessed a bit more. And so there would have been a lot less light coming down in here, but enough air movement to get in the windows, I suppose. Nice big 10-bed hostel room. It works pretty well because there's so much light and it's so big. Living room part of it. And they've done done that was clever is to keep exposed a portion of the inner wall so you can see the construction methods. Another example in the dorm room where they use sticks that are somewhat vertical or diagonal, and then they interweave it with willow branches or the equivalent. And yet in some instances they just use big slabs of raw cement. In some instances the cement covers in a different layer in the same wall from the use of the branches.